Good morning, children. Today we are going to start a new chapter, chapter 12, friction. In the previous chapter, force and pressure, there we have learned about force of friction. You know that frictional force or force of friction is a contact force. In this chapter, we will learn more about frictional force. What are the factors affecting friction, different types of friction, advantages and disadvantages of friction, fluid friction, etc. So let us start.
How do things move in real life? See, a ball is moving on a flat ground and there is no external force acting on it. Will the ball eventually come to a halt? Yes, it will. Have you ever wondered why? See, you are skating on an ice rink and your friend is skating on the road. Whose movement do you think will be smoother? Definitely yours. When you hold the bottle in your hand, why doesn't it just slip through and fall? Sometimes, when you are walking around in a mall, do you remember see a caution sign to warn you about the wet floor? What explains all this? The answer is friction. The reason why the ball eventually comes to a halt is because of the force of friction. The reason why skating on an ice rink is easier because the force of friction is lesser there. The bottle doesn't slip through because the force of friction between your hand and the bottle doesn't allow it to do so. If the floor is wet, the friction offered by it reduces and there are chances that you might slip and fall. So what is this friction be talking about? It is quite easy to understand the concept. Friction is nothing but force. It is the force exerted by a surface where an object moves across it. In the first case, when the ball moves in this direction, the force of friction is acting in the opposite direction. The force of friction offered by the ice rink is lesser than the force of friction offered by the road. Hence, skating on the ice rink is easier and seems effortless. The bottle doesn't slip down because the surface of your hand offers a friction in the upward direction. And in the case of the floor in the mall, the soapy water reduces the friction offered by the floor in the mall. Let us see the factors affecting friction. And we will also cover the different types of friction. Create an inclined slope on a table like this and mark a point somewhere on it. Now from this point, let a small cylindrical shaped object move down. You will see that it reaches a particular point and then stops. Next, place a sandpaper right under the slope and leave the object from the same point as before. What do you notice? You will see that the distance covered by the object is lesser in the second case, and you probably know why. The surface on which the objects rolled was rougher in the second case, and clearly the force of friction was more. Then what is the cause of friction? Friction is caused due to the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. What do you mean by irregularities? Even though the table looks smooth, if we zoom into the surface, we will see the surface irregularities. Even the surface of the object has irregularities. Now the irregularities on the surfaces lock into one another. So whenever we have to move an object, we need to overcome the irregularities. But why is the friction higher on the rough surfaces? This is because rougher the surfaces, more will be the irregularities. And if the irregularities are more, then more force will be required to overcome them. So the first factor affecting the friction is the nature of surfaces. Is there any other factor you can think of? Place two bricks on a table. One weighs 2 kilograms and the other weighs 5 kilograms. Now apply equal force on them towards the right. Which brick do you think will go farther? Remember that they are kept on the same surface and the surfaces of the brick are also the same. On applying the same amount of force, you will notice that the lighter brick covered more distance than the heavier one. What does it tell us? It tells us that the friction also depends on the force with which the two surfaces are pressed together. If the two surfaces are pressed harder, the friction will be more. Why is it so? Because here the second brick has greater weight. It presses on the table with greater force. Since its surface and the table surface are pressed together harder, the interlocking between the irregularities is more, and this results in more friction. So mainly on two things on which force of friction depends: the nature of both surfaces and the force with which the two surfaces are pressed together. Types of friction. To move a stationary object, you have to apply force. As you apply continuously increasing force to the stationary object, the force of friction also increases. The force of friction between two or more solid objects which are not moving related to each other is called static friction. As you apply more force, there comes a point when the object starts moving. At this point, the static friction is the maximum. Once the box begins to move, it is easier to slide it. This is because now, related to the floor, the box is moving and the irregularities of the box and the floor do not get enough time to lock into each other. The friction produced between a surface and an object sliding over it is called sliding friction. Moving a box kept on a stand with wheels is much easier as the wheels roll over the surface of the floor. The force of friction produced between the rolling object and the surface is called rolling friction. It is easy to observe that the force required to start the motion of an object is more than the force required to continue to keep it in motion. It is thus justified to say that sliding friction is less than static friction. Also, rolling an object is easier than sliding it. Hence, rolling friction is less than sliding friction. We can simply express it as static friction greater than sliding friction greater than rolling friction. Now you understand why it is convenient to pull a heavy travel bag fitted with rollers than sliding it. The principle of rolling friction is used in machines by using ball bearings. Ball bearings are small metallic balls which roll between two moving surfaces and reduce friction between them.